guys, Levi here at Motor Masters. Wanted to take a second today to talk about one of the situations we have in the shop. This customer had presented this vehicle with a oil and coolant situation. They were really looking to get this diagnosed, but as we got into this engine, we actually found multiple points of failure that are really going to inevitably lead to full engine rebuild on this engine. As we had gotten into talking to the customer about this, we really were super surprised to find out that this vehicle and engine has been at the dealership every 5,000 miles for not just oil changes, but for a ton of services that ultimately ended up looking like they just never got done. Going through what caused the point of failure on this engine, these 1.8 turbos have a known head gasket issue, which is what we were expecting to find whenever we had the oil and coolant situation. We went ahead and did a compression test, found low compression across the board. The coolant is entering the engine oil system through the head gasket. So we had gone into the process of looking into doing a head gasket on this. However, doing our due diligence, one of the things that we had found was bearing material inside the oil filter. So one of the things that we do, especially when we're talking about rebuilding an engine, is we're going through it in the first place to make sure that the engine block itself is capable of being rebuilt, as oftentimes that's not always the case when you're talking about having a block crack or some kind of failure that can't be seen or can't be identified with the normal tests as far as the engine goes. You have those situations occur where you really can't rebuild the engine. And going through the due diligence of this, one of the things that we do once again is check the oil filter. And when we're getting into this oil filter, as you can see, this oil filter has bearing material on the inside of the filter. There's quite a bit of metal, long metal shavings, small metal shavings, and what that is an indication of is some type of bearing material has entered this engine oil system. And when you're looking at metal in your engine oil system, the reality is that you have bearing damage throughout your engine. It's not going to be isolated to a single point, and the only way to fix this correctly at this point is going to be to do a full lower end rebuild, a head gasket, top end rebuild, and then we can get it back to the customer so it can have some longevity. The crazy part about this particular deal is that these people outside of this particular moment have taken us to the dealership for every single service. They have paid for every single service and job that the dealership has suggested to them. They've changed their oil religiously every 5,000 miles. They've done everything that they were supposed to do, and they ended up in this position not because the customer wasn't doing the right thing, but because they were taking it somewhere that they were supposed to be able to trust to handle their vehicle, even at the cost of more money. It was ultimately going to mean that they were getting taken care of and that their vehicle was going to have some longevity to it, not instead having an engine that really needs to be replaced at a little over 100,000 miles, which ultimately is something that the customer had been experiencing. The issues that may have caused this were something the customer had been experiencing for a while. They had taken this back to the dealership multiple times to try to get the issues that ultimately caused this resolved, and they continuously were pushed off and told that they were either non-issues or issues that they were being paid for and fixed, although the customer explicitly commented that each time they had gotten a repair done, they were not seeing the validation of what they had paid for. They weren't seeing the results in what they had paid for, and they weren't seeing differences and changes in what they had paid for. That's why it's so important these days that when we're talking about services or mechanical jobs, leaks, whatever we're getting done, it is imperative that before and after we get repairs done, we verify a couple different things. One, that the repair actually needs to be done. If you guys have something going on with your vehicle, 110% of the time, if I can't produce a test in front of you that is ultimately showing you point of failure, then the test doesn't exist and it probably isn't actually bad or doesn't need to be done. There's always proof in what we're doing. The other thing that we have to, as consumers, make sure to do is we are checking work after our shops are doing it. We're not worried about who it is, if it's your friend, if it's your brother-in-law, it doesn't matter. I don't care what shop you go to. If you are getting automotive work done on your vehicle these days, it is imperative that you are double checking the work that gets done, making sure that the work that you paid for was done accurately and is actually fixing the issues that you guys are paying thousands of dollars oftentimes to fix.
Tell us about the spark plugs.
And that was a whole other thing where there was a lot of evidence on this engine that it had never been taken apart. That there was services that had been sold to this customer. Case in point was the spark plugs. These spark plugs are the OE spark plugs in this thing. You can see how they had lost quite a bit of the ceramic material throughout the life of the plug. This is completely unacceptable. These people paid multiple times for these to have done, and there was just a lot of evidence that there was never a single set of wrenches or sockets that got set on this engine. There was, like I said, no evidence that any of the plugs had been touched. As far as the electrical connectors, none of the service screws, none of the fluids had been touched, and they had paid for all of this stuff to get done. It's an unbelievable tragedy that these people are ultimately looking at on the closer side of $10,000 repair for an engine that really they have put a massive amount of effort into making sure it was going to last them a really long time. And instead of them getting what they paid for, they were robbed, cheated, and stole from. And now they're in a position where they're having to try to recoup their losses because of so. It's a terrible situation. It's a lot of the things that we're trying to avoid. We have a whole other vehicle that we're about to do another video on for a similar reason. And we are going to continue to emphasize that if you are coming here or anywhere else, you guys have to double check that work needs to be done, that it's getting done, and that you guys are actually being taken care of in the way that these shops are promising. That's all I have for this vehicle today. Appreciate you guys stopping by.